Hello, Mitchell. Yeah, it's so wonderful meeting you virtually. And thank you so much for joining us today in the Insight Sharing Section show. Sharing with us more about your work, especially in creditability. Yeah. So, would you please share a bit about yourself to the audience and our here today, and how did you come up with the journey become a global expert in the creditability?
That's such a big, broad question. So let's if you look at my background, what I'll say is I've been in Silicon Valley for 35 years. I've been happily married for 33. We have a son who is successfully in the workforce, and he's 23. So those are all really cool things. Um, I the last time I worked for a company was with Sun Microsystems, and that was I left in 1997.
Long ago.
And that was a couple years ago. And at the time, I was running the e-commerce component of Sun Supply Chain. And since then, I've started 20 companies. I've sat on the board of a NASDAQ firm for 9 years. I have run 4 different CEO networking groups for a decade. I've created 4 different executive business programs for Silicon Valley universities. I currently have a book publishing company. We have published over 750 books.
Oh.
And I've done two TEDx's. I've written 65 books myself. And so that's stuff. So now we'll jump into how did I get to focus on credibility?
No,
So I think,
sorry, before we get there, we want a secret sauce from you first. I want to bring you all the way back when you was in university, Michelle.
okay.
And then how could, because we all the same human beings, right? But then your journey is so fantastic. So we want to learn the secret sauce from back then. What did you study, and then how did you ended up being entrepreneur, sitting at the bar and write books and even publish books, and bring us back to that secret though.
I don't know if there's secret sauce. We'll just say there's baby steps along the way. Like this doesn't happen overnight. Technically, nothing happens overnight. There are occasional people who win the lottery and they happen overnight. But otherwise, for most of us normal humans, you just focus on your passion. You focus on what gets you excited. I've always loved what I've done. And it to me, the thing is if work equals play, then you get to play all the time. Right. And so my undergraduate degree turns out to be so I went to the University of Miami, and I originally started off as a marketing and finance person. And that first semester was so easy. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to go to college and I'm going to spend 100% of my time studying for 4 years, I might as well make it as hard as possible. So I went to the guidance counselor and I said, what is the hardest program? I still wanted business because I knew I needed to be business. What is the hardest program?
Wow.
And it turns out that the Industrial Engineering Organization did something in partnership with the business school. And the program was called, this is a lot of syllables. I'm still happy when I could say it. It was a Bachelor of Science in Stochastic and Deterministic Models of Operational Research.
Wow.
So let me share that in shorter term frame. We were taught how to model systems and people and improve them.
People improve them. Yes.
So what happened, what's surprising to me is a lot of people went for their undergraduate degree and then they've never used it in their life. I've used many of the lessons I've learned in my undergraduate my entire career. And so when I left University of Miami. I ended up going to get my MBA, and it was either the University of Miami or the College of William and Mary, which is in Williamsburg, Virginia. And the the college just made the College of William and Mary. It's a beautiful campus, and they made an offer. They offered me a full tuition fellowship and to take a semester off the school, and I could not go. Um, and what happened we'll just think about both undergrad. So in undergrad, I found a trick. The trick was in university, the way it's structured most of the time today in undergraduate, the answer is always in the back of the book.
The answer.
And by the way, this is not real life, but that was university. And if you were smart, you would go to the first day of classes when the instructor who was excited about talking about their program was talking about what they were excited about, because at least 30 to 40% of what was on the final exam was mentioned during the first day of class. So you just had to take notes.
We will tell our daughter, she's in America for university now. So
well, it often, sometimes things change, but generally speaking, that's still how it works. And the other thing is when the professor offers office hours, what's interesting is many people look at that as punishment. But the point is, if the university professor puts themselves out there for office hours, and you're one of a small number of people who go, and by being in there, they get to meet you and see you and maybe help you a little bit. They end up taking a personal interest in you being successful.
Yeah.
Okay, so go to office hours, be polite to your faculty members, listen to them on their first day, right? Those are, now, when I went to MBA, what ended up happening is the dean offered me a full tuition fellowship and then also took a semester off of, it was a 2-year program. And so they took a semester off, and that was both good and bad for me. So what that meant in my first semester, I was in a classroom with both first years and second years. Now, one of the things that happens in the MBA program, or at least many of them, from what I understand, is they teach you that the answer is no longer in the back of the book.
Yeah.
Right? Which, of course, that was new to me. And so in my first semester, being in a classroom with second years who had already figured this out and I hadn't figured it out yet, that was not great. But I figured that out. And one of the things I ended up doing is I ended up doing an independent research with one of the faculty members, right? So typically when you're going to college, you get to see who you relate to. And there was one person who just had a personal pet project. And so I ended up helping that professor prove a theory that he had in his mind using software. At the time it was SAS, as a statistical programming language. And so I actually was able to prove a theory that he had and make it reality. And it was one of those things, I'm a night owl. So it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. I figured this out and I was excited about sharing it with him in the next day. He was really excited about it and hadn't talked to him for about 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, I went into his office and said, listen, I already started writing the paper. Because, as a college student, you want to establish credibility. And how you do that is you get written up in papers and stuff that you do. So I started writing the paper. I came in and said, listen, I started writing the paper. This is really cool. And I said, would you like to do this with me? And his answer was no.
What?
Exactly. His answer was no. I used the theory to get a job in Boston using the formula, and you're going to come with me. So I'm like, okay, right? And so what happens many times for most people is a lot of times opportunity presents itself
Mm.
And if we're not open to listening and receiving, we may let opportunity go away.
Mm.
So
Did
a
you go to
lot of the
Boston with him? Did you go to
say that
Boston?
again. Sorry.
Did you go to Boston with him?
So I went to Boston with him,
Uh,
um, and it turned out we didn't get along. So we were together for a year. And if you watch my first or second TEDx, you'll learn a little bit about who he was. As a manager, he wasn't a good manager. Um, and and so I ended up leaving him in a year, then went over to State Street Bank for a couple of years, then ended up meeting a girl who
mm.
moved to who after 2 months of us being together, she moved to California, and 6 months later, I followed her. And a year and a half after that, we got married, and we've been married now for 33 years. So,
33, right?
so serendipity has often been a good lesson for me in terms of who I am and where I've done. I didn't necessarily like the culture in Boston. Now this is a number of years ago,
Mm.
because it was always wearing a suit and good clothing and always dressing up, and one of the things my first boss taught me, which was never to come up have my own opinion, always have the opinion that he would want me to have, which by the way wasn't a good thing. That took me a number of years to unlearn. Um, and in particular, I also one of the benefits of Silicon Valley, one of the things that makes Silicon Valley so powerful, it's not just that there's a lot of smart people here. There are. It's not just that there's a lot of money here. There is. The thing that makes Silicon Valley different than anywhere else in the world is collaboration. It's co-creation. It's
Ah.
the fact that if two engineers get together and they're solving the same problem, it doesn't matter if they're from different companies. They can
Mm.
help each other.
Mm.
I didn't like that when I was in Boston,
Mm.
that there was such fierce competition. It seemed arbitrary. It didn't seem natural. It didn't seem very collegiate. I didn't like it as much. And that's what I liked a whole lot more about Silicon Valley.
and then and then since when you start to having your own business and starting to create businesses?
So, so first I go to Silicon Valley and I found a job while I was in Boston, and it was a startup company, and I just sort of assumed startup company, Silicon Valley, I'm going to be rich.
Uh,
Um, Now, when you go to work for a company, I'm going to say, what are the primary business models, right? What are the primary things they're trying to do? And I won't go into detail, but what I'm going to say is there were three things they were trying to do, and two of them were really stupid. I just didn't really, so I can't come up with a better word. And so subsequently, the company went out of business a year later.
uh,
And and so at this stage, I'm in Silicon Valley. I've been here for a year. And I go to my parents and I go, what should I do?
mm,
They gave me great advice. So I'll be happy to share this advice.
please.
They said, go to a big company.
Mm,
And if you go to a big company and you do a good job to start, then what'll happen is you'll get to see other potential jobs inside the company, and you can move around and see what you really like doing.
okay.
It actually was really good advice. And I was with Sun Microsystems for 9 years.
9 years. Mm,
And one of the things that happened is when I was in financial IT services at some point in time, one of the best places. It was the people who ended up becoming VP of operations, presidents, CEOs of different companies. It turned out to be this department that just groomed amazing people.
mm,
I went from there to the supply chain operations side, and it turned out that the VP of operations needed, because it's Sun Microsystems, we needed to do stuff with e-commerce,
mm,
and there was like four or five different projects going on with e-commerce, but there was nobody that was a focal point. So I was brought in as being a focal point for all the e-commerce activities for the supply chain operation side. And one of the things that happened, and this is another good lesson to learn, at the time, Sun Microsystems paid, there was a nonprofit company called CommerceNet. CommerceNet was a nonprofit focused on the proliferation of the internet in business. Right. So there was a point in time where people were thinking the internet was a fad.
Yes.
And so Sun Microsystems paid CommerceNet $25,000 a year to be part of the entity. And I was part of CommerceNet and Sun Microsystems. And when CommerceNet said, "Hey, we'd like you, Sun Microsystems, to have a spokesperson," and the guy from supply chain operations shouldn't have been the spokesperson. It should have been somebody from marketing, but marketing didn't want to participate. So they asked me, and I go, "Sure." Right? Once again, opportunity.
It is.
Some people would say, "Hey, that was more work." Wait, you want to be a spokesperson for an organization that's a nonprofit and you're not getting paid? That's a lot more work. I'm like, okay, sure. I'll be that person. Now, here's what was interesting. In 1996, there's a company called AC Nielsen. They do surveys. Okay, you know, AC Nielsen did a survey in conjunction with CommerceNet of looking at how many users were on the internet. And they came up with the number 50 million.
Wow.
Now, apparently at 50 million, that was the time where the internet was real, not a fad.
Yeah.
And so when they did the announcement, all the reporters and the journalists went to CommerceNet and said, "Hey, who should we talk to?" And CommerceNet says, "Well, you got to talk to Sun Microsystems." And when they, and talking to Sun Microsystems, well, you got to talk to the spokesperson. So all of a sudden I was listed in all these papers, so first I go to it's the same sort of thing. I go to the marketing guys, "Listen, I'm being asked to do all this stuff. What do I say?" I mean, I wasn't media trained, right? And the good news is just, the answer was just tell the truth the way you see it. Right? It gave me a very interesting opening. And within about a year, the Silicon Valley and e-commerce was so hot. It was hard for me to stay at the company because it just seemed like a lot of opportunity. So that's when it was 1997 when I started my own business.
So the first baby step coming from working for the startup company, go to Sun, and then go to CommerceNet, then start your own business, and the journey as an entrepreneur takes place from there. How about
Absolutely. Well, CommerceNet was a nonprofit that I didn't work for CommerceNet. That was just an organization that when I was at Sun, I was part of, right?
Yes.
So I'll give you another lesson that I learned is, so when I went out to do my own thing, a couple of things happened. First, one of my friends said something really powerful. They said, "Mitchell, to establish credibility, you want to do one of three things. Write a book, speak at events, or teach at a university." Right? Because any one of those three things can help on the credibility side. I'm kind of the person who likes to do a lot, so I did all three.
Oh, you did all three.
Right? And we'll come back to that in a second. And then something else happened is when I was going out and talking to my friends, and it was, okay, I started my own company. I'm ready to jump in business. And I was, because of the work I had done, I wanted to do strategy work, helping companies figure out how to integrate the internet into what they do in business. And so after about 2 weeks, it was one of my former bosses at Sun Microsystems said, "Mitchell, what do you know about SEO? What do you know about search engine optimization?" And so here I am, I want to do high level strategy work for companies. And one of my guys is asking me, what do I know about SEO? And I was smart enough not to give him a silly answer.
What did you
right?
ask him?
So what I said was very simple, is I don't really know much today, but give me 2 weeks. I'll figure out everything I need to know. And his response was he was a web development company. He had a web development company and he had so many clients who were asking him for SEO and he didn't want to take anyone out of his company to focus on it.
Uh,
And he was feeling like he was leaving money on the table.
uh,
Right. So he goes, Mitchell, what can you do? I said, well, give me 2 weeks. So by the way, in 1997, buying everything on the internet on the SEO was not that hard.
mm,
Right. So I learned everything we need to know. 2 weeks later, I came back in and I said, listen, here's what I think we should do. Why don't you charge your clients $15,000 to do SEO, and I'll charge you 10, so you get to keep 5,000. He goes, okay, and we sold 5. Right now, what was interesting, once again, I still making money is okay, but if you don't like what you're doing,
mm,
what was interesting is in order to do SEO properly, at least at the time, it's still actually somewhat true today. You just have a whole lot more technology. In order to do SEO properly, I would end up going to and at the time it was typically the CMO, the chief marketing officer, or the CEO directly. And I'd say, what is your 30-second elevator pitch? Because
mm,
at the time, it was as simple as when somebody articulated their 30-second elevator pitch, what would come out of it were
mm,
2 or 3 phrases that you need to focus on.
mm.
Now, here's where you're going to find it very fascinating. So I went to 5 people, asked them for their 30-second elevator pitch. All 5 people took 10 to 15 minutes to give me their 30-second elevator pitch.
And are they the same or different? Were they the same?
No, the point of that, they're all different because they're different companies. The point of
Uh,
that, though, is that people are not taught to talk in short, succinct ways. What that meant was each one of them needed strategic consulting on how to put together their 30-second elevator pitch, how to show up in a way that their customers will see them better. 2 of them became strategic clients for me.
uh,
So it's one of those things that, once again, I'd say is when there's opportunity and and what may originally sound like not the best thing for you isn't always the right time to say no. Because by saying no when you don't see the bigger picture, you may be closing the door in a way that you don't want to.
I got it. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mijo. Can I bring you all the way back to your childhood? Is that something that when you was a little, you already have that mentality with you back then? Or is that something come up when you grown up? No.
When my mom turned out to be a school teacher with 3 kids, so we were poor.
Mm,
And so the thing that I remember most from being young is I didn't feel poor,
mm,
right?
uh,
Mom made us feel like we could do whatever we wanted to do,
mm,
and so the what would happen, so these are kids excitement level, like every Monday night we would have a certain meal, like different meals than they'd be in Vietnam, but every Monday night we'd have hot dogs, or every Tuesday we'd have sloppy joes, every Wednesday we'd have peanut butter and jelly, like not normal for traditional meals for people. But I didn't realize that till later on, but that was my mom's way of keeping the prices down,
uh,
right? But we didn't feel that way. We didn't feel like we were poor, and she still left us with the feeling that we could do what we want to do as long as we put our heart to it. We really try.
wow, that's wonderful advice. In an environment that she nurture you and created for you guys, right? So earlier this conversation, Bicho, you say that your friends told you to build credibility. There's 3 things to do. One is write a book, teach at university, and give speech, right? And you did 3 of them. We want to know how you make the baby steps in writing a book, though.
Well, the book's the easy part. Do you mind? Well, I want to get one of the stories out of the way, and then we'll go to the book afterwards.
Sure, please.
Is
Yes.
that okay? Okay.
Yes.
So during the dot-com days, I got really busy. So it was about a year later, I got really busy in 1998. I started teaching at San Jose State University, and I started writing, I think it might have been my second book. We'll come back to the book thing.
Mm.
And I started speaking both when I was at Sun Microsystems, because remember, the person who was the CommerceNet representative to Sun Microsystems got invited to speak at events. So one of the events I spoke at was in 1996. Being able to speak on the same stage as Mark Cuban, we were on a panel together in Comdex, because via that connection. All right, so I started teaching at San Jose State, and I think it was towards the end of 98, 99, I just ran out of time. I just was busy enough that I didn't really have time to teach anymore. So another lesson I'll say is you should never actually really quit. So what I did is I went into the dean. I said, listen, I either have to do more or I have to do less. Actually, not knowing what more would be, but I said that, and what they said, which was to my shock, is, why don't you create an executive business program for us? I'm like, oh, okay. I hadn't thought about that before. So while I'm in the room, what I thought about was, well, let's book a time. And so I booked it 3 weeks down the road. Let's book a time to talk again, and I'll come up with a plan. So I came back in three weeks later, and I go, here's what we're going to do. 9 months from now, we're going to start the program. It was September is the right time to start program. So 9 months from now, we're going to start the program. I'm going to help you create 30 courses. I don't want you to pay me anything for all the work I'm going to do. I just want you to give me a piece of the door. Now, they actually laughed at me, because nobody has ever been able to create a program and make money. So they just thought I was working for free. And it turns out that we ended up selling over 4,700 course seats. We took in over $2 million. And then the university was very unhappy paying me all the stuff that they had to pay me, right? But I think it's another opportunity that to recognize, if you love what you do, you just don't close the door to opportunity. Right. So that's the thing that's fascinating. Okay, that leave you to another thought process, or do you want me to jump on books?
Up to you. Since you're on the thought process, continue with that, please.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So let's see. What most people will remember, or if you don't remember, there was that first huge wave, that euphoria about the internet came with the dot-bomb collapse, which was around the 2000, 2001 timeframe. And for a long time in Silicon Valley, all you had to do is spell the word e-commerce and you made money. And then there was a period of time where anything e-commerce was looked at as horrible. I know it's hard to believe, but that actually is what happened. Well, for a guy who was running an e-commerce company, that was not a good time for me. So one of the things I ended up doing is running a series of CEO networking groups. That came out of one of my students from the San Jose State program came to me one day and said, listen, I created this company. I try to do it myself. I can't do it alone. I need to have you be part of it. Now, here's where you made a mistake. At least I didn't realize it was a mistake. He goes, you don't have to do any work, and I'll give you a third of the company. Like, who would not say no? Who would not say yes to that? So I said yes, but I didn't realize that if you have a networking company, you got to do work. I mean, you can't have a networking company without networking. And I kept looking for what's next.
Mm.
And it was 2005 that I realized that that was what was coming with Amazon and everything going on is the
Mm.
democratization of book publishing.
Mm.
So I started a book publishing company in 2005.
Wow, that's 17 years already.
Right.
Mm.
And so prior to that, at some point in time, by the way, I'm always a giver when I share. So during the dot-com days, I had a bunch of people. I was on a ton of different advisory boards. So when somebody says, "Hey, Mitchell, would you like to support us?" The answer always is, "Can I?" Like, do I feel like I could add value?
Mm.
And then if I can, the answer is typically yes. And
Mm.
so there was a company that was asking me to support them for a while. And after a couple of years, the CEO goes, Mitchell, you've been acting like a board member for long enough. Why don't you join our board? And so
Wow.
that's how I got to be on the board of a public company.
Mm.
Right. So I think one of the things that you're going to hear is being open,
Mm.
being curious, being a servant leader, trying
Mm.
to be of service to other people. It's not, my first question was not how much money does it pay? That's not the right question,
Mm.
right? The question is, well, can I do it? Like, what do you need? Can I be of service? How does it, how is it different than what I'm doing at the moment? Like can I add value, right?
Yeah.
It's the right question. And of course, many things came from that as well, right?
Mm.
So, but we're doing the somewhat abbreviated version. But I would say for those who are listening, and this is what came out of credibility, is to be of service to others is probably the highest thing you could possibly do.
Mm.
Right. And so, but we're gonna catch up to that. So book publishing company. I started it in 2005. It was a cross between, if you understand, between a traditional publisher and a hybrid publisher. Hybrid
Mm.
publishers, what they do is they actually charge to publish books, right? And so I was a little bit of both. So there were some books that I just published for no cost and I just took profit on the back end. At some point in time, I moved towards more of charging for our services and a profit on the back end.
Mm.
And I'm going to say I got complacent, right? I hit the point where I was working, had a good life, making good money, and I was invited by a friend to do a TEDx in 2017. So,
2007.
so
Yeah.
2017. So we're going to fast forward to that.
Mm.
And one of the things that's good about the TED organization is they encourage you to have a talk about an idea worth sharing, not a marketing idea worth sharing.
Mm.
That's a big difference, right?
Yes.
Everything out of my mouth was always marketing. And so in putting that first TEDx together, it got me thinking about the world in a different way. And when I had that mind, I'll just ask you both a question. You ever go on vacation and you go to a location you've never gone before and you see the world like you're just like everything is so cool and fascinating? Does that sound?
Yes. Sounds
And when you go home, do you still wear those same eyes?
Yes.
That's what I'm getting at. It's like it doesn't last for long, but when you go home, you're like you see things in your house you've never seen before, right? So I was viewing the world in a different way, and I realized that the customer base I had in the book publishing model I had, wasn't exactly the customer base I wanted to continue having,
Wow.
right? Because it was people who wrote their own books, and typically by the time 2017 came along, you're going to write your own books for one of three reasons. Either for cathartic reasons, so you're writing it because you needed to get it out of your system. B, you were a public speaker and you didn't know what to say until you actually wrote it down.
Mm.
Or C, you had such a huge inflated ego that you thought if you could write something down on a piece of paper, and only you could write it down on a piece of paper, that it would sell without ever having to market it. I realized that that's no longer an audience I wanted to serve.
Mm.
So what I ended up doing in 2018 is building a writing school. We graduated some people through it. I picked up 10 clients, and in 2019, I actually flew to a friend's conference with the intent of rebranding myself.
Mm.
And so that's when I came up with the brand Global Credibility Expert.
Ah, so that is where you be you name yourself as you create the credibility nations and global credibility expert,
Oh,
right?
not yet. Not
Uh,
yet. You're fast forwarding a little bit. Um, the that was when, so it was 2019 that I came up with the brand Global Credibility Expert. Having been in Silicon Valley, been part of all the companies that I've been part of as both board and advisory board and consulting, um, lots of coaching and consulting for many different people and brands. I felt very comfortable with that title.
mm,
This is in 2019. And then 2 months after wearing the title, I woke up one morning and I had a Napoleon Hill experience.
what is that?
You remember Napoleon Hill interviewed 500 millionaires to come up with Think and Grow Rich.
Yes.
And so I'm thinking, Mitchell Levy, if I interview 500 thought leaders on credibility, I'd have a book.
Mm,
Okay. So I just kind of thought, okay, I do have um, I have two superpowers that I knew of when before I started the interview process. One was being able to pull the genius from somebody's head. And basically, once again, very similar to other things I said, you have to be an active listener.
yeah.
Okay. You both are pretty good at this, right? You listen, you interpret, you try to ask what's next. Most people are not active listeners. So I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you.
Okay. So one was pulling the genius from somebody's head. That's how we can ghostwrite books from people, is I pull out the appropriate genius they need. The second is building systems. And that goes back to my undergraduate degree.
Mm,
And I was able to interview 500 people on Tuesday and Wednesday afternoon, typically Tuesday and Wednesday afternoons, 10 to 12 people a day. And my team was able to keep up because we have 3 different podcasts. So we do the interviews, we turn them into podcasts, we then break them into a couple different areas, and at the same time write the book and still have a publishing company, right? So building systems was something that I was particularly good at. What I didn't realize is I have an expertise on allowing people to get clarity,
uh,
right? So when I first started it, what I didn't realize I knew how to build a model where you can do interviews. I didn't know all the things I should be asking about. So the truth is, it wasn't until like the first 5 or 10 interviews that I realized some of the things I needed to keep track of. You're going to be, some of these things are very simple and really sad. And even in our meeting today, you reached out to me because I wasn't there on time because I ended up having an event that went a whole lot longer. And it was only that I saw you pinging me on WhatsApp that I go, oh my goodness. And you were kind enough to give me another half hour to wrap up on my event. So I want to say thank you. But that's me being rude to you, not on purpose. Right. And the fact that you were flexible was great. And if you remember in my response to you was, hey, can we move it back a half hour? Or do I need to come now?
mm,
Because I made a promise to you. So if
yes.
I needed to come now, I'd tell the other people, my team, I need to come now. And I would have done that because that's my integrity, right? So what I didn't realize in the first 5 or 10, I needed to keep track of, are you ready? Do people show up on time? Do people show up and they're ready for the interview?
Mm,
Do people show up and they share with me their heart? Do people show up and they actually can articulate? Let's go back to that 30-second elevator pitch that took 10 minutes. Can people articulate who they serve and the pain point they address in seconds? i.e., do people understand their purpose?
Mm.
The answer is, this is crazy. So 23% of the 500 people I interviewed came late. Now, I define late to a live interview as coming within 3 minutes of the time we were going live. But this is really scary. 4%. So 20 out of 500 people came after the hour for a live show.
Ah.
Can you imagine that? You're doing a live show and they come after the hour for the
Yes.
live show. Like, doesn't make sense to me. But the number that made the least amount of sense to me was that 98% of the people I interviewed could not articulate their purpose.
Mm.
98%. If you take it a step further, it's quite possible that 98% of people are born, they live and they die without ever actually realizing who they were and were meant to be.
Okay. That's serious.
Well, that's what I thought.
Mm.
And as what I can help people do, what I realized, I call it a CPOP. It's called a customer point of purpose. It could be a pain point, customer point of pain, could be customer point of pleasure, could be, it's actually, I'm sorry, customer point of possibilities. That's what I meant to say. I'm sorry, customer point of possibilities. And it goes back to, if you're a servant leader, how are you supporting your customers?
Mm.
Now, husband, wife, you guys are both customers of each other.
Yes. Yes.
Right? Just to be clear, I mean, there's no negative connotation with customer. It's you're of service to each other. You can live a whole much happier life if you go through life thinking that way, right? And so for a long time, I'm able to have the clarity. I could sit with almost anyone in the world and quickly help them articulate their CPOP.
Mm-hmm.
And for a while, I'm kind of thinking this was me. So I let my ego get pretty big. Hey, it's my third superpower is clarity. But when I really thought about it, I realized that this is trainable. What I'm doing, allowing somebody to articulate their customer point of possibilities, is a trainable solution.
Mm.
If it's trainable, that means we were taught wrong. If we were taught wrong about not wearing our purpose on our sleeve, where else were we taught wrong?
Mm.
And so I finished the interviews in August of 2020. It was in July of 2020 that I actually have a new life purpose.
Ah.
And the life purpose was simply, if you look at the way the world is today, and it's even one of the reasons why you wanted me to come on your show, is there's so much negativity. There's so much, the world keeps going in a spiraling in a downward direction in a way that you're like, did that really happen?
Mm.
And I truly believe, and so I did a TEDx. It's called "We Are Losing Our Humanity," and I'm tired of watching it happen.
Mm.
It was the 28th most popular TEDx in 2021. And what it does is it focuses on a very simple model. If we can do nothing more than be credible to each other, we will be more humane to each other.
Mm.
And so that's now my life purpose, is to allow more people to understand what credibility is and to tip the scales between those people that are credible, and I call the opposite of credible dubious. Dubious isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not like a good or bad, heaven or hell, white or black, right? Or in the US, red or blue, like party lines, right? But it's about, sometimes we do things that are not credible, not because we are being bad, not because we're malevolent, or not because we're malicious. Sometimes we do things that are bad because that's what we were taught and we don't know better. And so it's about allowing people to focus on what truly is credible. And so I have I would encourage people to watch the TEDx, right? And it's called, once again, "We're Losing Our Humanity." I'm tired of watching it happen. I do have a book. It's Credibility Nation. It is focused on having a framework around credibility. And what I'll say is credibility is the quality in which you are trusted, known, and liked. All right. So credibility is the quality in which you're trusted, known, and liked. And underneath that, there are 10 skill sets or characteristics of what you can demonstrate. And I've mentioned a number of them in this call so far. And for me, I'll go back to I'm feeling like a kid in a candy store again. You know, sort of how you feel when you start off life. Like, what do I do? I know what I need to do. I have no idea how to do it. I mean, how do you encourage the world to be more credible? Right? I mean, I just know to do pieces and to be in front of the right people at the right time, and some interesting opportunity will open up that I hadn't thought of. Right? And that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. And it's been a beautiful and fun journey, and it is the coolest in the world for me. I've got 475 testimonials of people who do something like it goes in the testimonials like, Mitchell, I've been looking for clarity of my purpose for the last, and then you fill in the number of years, 2, 5, 10, 12 years, and you gave it to me quickly. Sometimes people say as little as 5 minutes. And the really cool thing is when somebody can actually be in alignment with themselves, and somebody could actually share their purpose, like you could feel it, how much more comfortable they are, who they are, and what they do. Right. So anyhow, I'm that's kind of me at the moment, and how I got. So the book stuff is the book stuff for me is I have a formula and approach to writing books. I'll leave this in there. Typically, when we now ghostwrite a book for somebody else, what happens is when people come to us, they go, "Hey, would you like us to can we do a book?" And the answer is yes. And a lot of times when people want a book, they want a history book. They want to write about who they were in the past. That's not the books we do. The books that I do is I want to make sure I understand somebody's purpose in life. I want to understand their CPOP. And it turns out the title of the book is often their CPOP. And here's the cool part. When we deliver the book with them, and that's where a lot of coaching and consulting comes in, but when we deliver the book with them, they'll often catch up to the book, right? So the book is not a history lesson, but the book is who they're going to be and how they serve going forward. And that's where I get really excited, is to help people, whether it's through the power of giving somebody an asset like a book, or just giving somebody a CPOP so they could be in alignment with who they are, so people know who they are and they could recommend them.
I have no idea why Vivian muted me, but it seems to me like she has a questions for you or so. So
Sorry, that was a little bit of a long answer, but I wanted to make sure we strung in those lessons lessons learned.
Vivian, you're on mute. You're good now.
Yeah, it was a bit of background noise from his side, so I try to make it more clarity for your speaking. Yeah.
Can you say that again? Because you cut in and out in your question.
I unmuted him. I muted him because there was some background noise. Yeah.
I thought you have a question for Mitchell that you would want me to, unmute so that you can ask him. But Mitchell,
Yeah.
yes,
sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it's a lot. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I think from your experience, surrounding with the right type of people really help to open up your opportunities, right? So for us here, from day to day and virtually, we are talking right now. How would that be difference when the situation change pre-COVID and after COVID? How do we choose or surround ourselves with right type people virtually? From your opinion, just yeah, some advices to hear from your side.
Aren't you already doing that? I mean, it sure seems to me that you found an organization that you liked, the Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. You're reaching out, and that by being part of that, it's a really selective group of people, and you're reaching out to try to share those stories. The cool part about COVID is, and I know I've said this doesn't sound like cool part, COVID doesn't sound like they go together, but is that you really could talk to anyone in anywhere in the world. And if your job is to be of service, which is how you approach me, I want to be of service. I want to share your story to those people who want to hear it. It's really hard to say no,
Yeah.
right? Because you're coming with your heart. Now the question becomes, what's next? And I can't tell you what's next for you, right? What'll happen is some interesting opportunity will open up. If you listen, something that hasn't happened before will open. Maybe it'll be a Vietnamese company. Maybe it'll be another company who says, "Hey, these are good stories," or "We want to do something with it." And I
Yeah.
can't tell you what that is,
Thanks
right?
so
But it sure seems like that'll happen.
Thanks so much, Mitchell, for the CPOPs. That is something when we did it was mean just to support the people around us without any other intentions. But then when the more that we're doing it, the more I see the CPOPs. That's something that on the horizon that we are yet seeing, but when it comes, we are ready. So that's what I told Vivian all the time. We keep doing because the purpose is there. And then when you have the right purpose, then the possibilities will come knock on the door. But then it leads me to one question. It's very important because I had a lot of friends who are having good potentials, huge potentials. But then when opportunity knocks, they're afraid. All right, because it's a daunting, it's unknown, and it's outside of their comfort zone. But then you've been living a life, getting opportunity, and then capturing opportunities when it's come up, when they came up, right? So can you teach us how we're gonna be able to cope with the uncertainty and don't let opportunities slip on our fingers, though?
There's so many people who teach on that and talk about that. Um, I could I could probably say that there may be opportunities that came my way I didn't jump on that I could say, oh, I should have, but that's not how I live,
Mm,
right? So I always make every single decision in the best way possible for those that I'm surrounded with at the time. So when I made the decision to focus on credibility, I asked the most important person in my life, my wife, okay, this is going to bring this amount of activity. Or when I left Sun Microsystems, same thing. I asked the most important person in my life, hey, and she was pregnant at the time. Do you mind if this is something I do? I feel the need.
mm,
Right. So part of it is recognizing the potential of what may happen,
mm,
if you try it. And I'm going to say you'll never get to yes if you don't ask. You'll never achieve your goals if you don't try.
mm,
And what's the worst? So in the old days, we'll just say maybe when I was growing up, people remembered you your entire life. You did one thing bad and they brought it to you 40 years down. That's silly. That doesn't work anymore. Maybe it does in some cultures, but that's not what I see. That's not the world I see. And I'd rather be known as a person who tried many times and failed than the person always reaching.
mm,
Because the best way to think about this, really the best way to think about this, and you've probably heard this many times, is when you're sitting on your deathbed, you're literally just try to imagine yourself in a hospital and you've got 3 hours left and maybe even 3 good hours. Like you just know that something's going to happen when you're talking to whatever family you have around you. So imagine you don't have any family around you. There's nobody there.
mm,
How does that make you feel? Right? Imagine you have family, but they didn't come because they thought you weren't that important to them. How does
mm,
that make you feel? Are
mm,
you ever going to say, I wish I had one more dollar or whatever the denomination is, right? So it's the things that you may ever say to yourself, I regret not having tried, that one is so much worse than trying and not succeeding, because everything you do is a lesson. Everything, you fail, that's great. You learn something. You don't, when you're a kid and you learn how to ride a bike, if most kids, I don't know any kids who get on the bike and just ride, they fall and then
Mm,
they adjust. When you first start walking, how many times does a kid fall before
many.
they actually learn how to walk, right? So this is, for some odd reason, when we go to school,
Mm,
that ability to be salespeople, to be marketers, to be customer service, that ability to learn and grow and fumble, that gets beaten out of us.
mm.
And it's wrong, actually. It's just not the right way to teach.
Thanks, Mitchell, so much for the 60-minute session with us. You have been living a life so fascinating to me, to Vivian, and I think to many people around us. And then I congratulate you personally also for finding another purpose in life, where you build up the uh, the credibility nation, right? Where you want to be a global credibility expert and help the people find their CPOPs. And a lot of us living without knowing our purpose, and a lot of us living without knowing the possibilities in our life that we could be doing. So thank you very much for doing that. Hopefully next time, Vivian and I will be able to have you coaching us to find our CPOPs too.
Oh,
So
that is always a fun thing to do. I'm happy to do it. So, but yeah, no, it's more than just having understand your CPOP. The goal is for the world to be more credible, and that's the one that I'm looking for partners and people to play with, to bring this into corporations, bring this into countries, to bring us into the world where we can care about our fellow humans first.
sure. Thank you very much. And if there is anything that we could be supporting from the market of Vietnam, you let us know. And we were so happy to take our opportunities in the same boat with you on that market and on that
Love
platform.
that. Well,
All
we'll
right.
figure out something. That sounds great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mitchell, very much. And we wish you a wonderful evening. Say hello to your wife and say hello to your children. Okay.
All
We
right. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the two of you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you, Mitchell.